listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Andre Paraiso, filling in for our guy, Elliot Bowman, on the ones and twos. Michael, 13 NFL games that we saw Saturday. We saw 2 of them last night in the evening time. We want to start off with, hey, maybe the Denver Broncos went ahead and hit on this first-round pick, Bo Nix, because he looked outstanding once again in a couple of drives against the Green Bay Packers. It's just the preseason. We're not going to go too far, but Bo Nix, 8 of 9, 80 yards, and a touchdown pass as he continues to build on what he's done throughout training camp and now the preseason.
You know, I think what it really comes down to, Femi, it comes down to when the coach understands what he wants in a player. When you scout inside out as opposed to outside in, which most teams do, especially at the quarterback position, you know, hey, we'll draft this guy, we'll just let him go play. I think you can find the player that fits what you do. And Sean said from day one that Bo Nix could do what he wanted him to do. He was smart. He was experienced. He was the second best quarterback in the draft when he had to move around in the pocket and make plays. You know, Jaden Daniels was good running, but he never extended the play to throw. He ran, you know. And so I think to me, this is really a great example for anybody who's watching it who had a low grade on Bo Nix or didn't think Bo Nix was worthy of a first-round pick to say, look, it really comes down to the guy coaching them and the guy developing them. And I think we see it with Kevin O'Connell up in Minnesota. I think we see it with Sean McVay in Los Angeles. There's very few people that can coach the quarterback. Now, that's what happened in San Francisco is I just don't think they tried to fit a player that didn't fit what Kyle did into a system. It never works. Right. And you say, well, why wouldn't Kyle have known that? Well, I think, remember the rhetoric that was coming out about then? Well, they need to change what they do. People are catching on to Kyle's offense. Yeah, that really worked out. There's 5 more teams running Kyle's offense now. Right. So I think Bo Nix, and again, it's early and he played really well. His rhythm, his feet, he's tied together. Everything works with unison. He reads it quick, bangs it. He moves around. He looks down the field. The one play he got called for, you know, one play made a great play, but he threw the ball beyond the line of scrimmage and when he was on the move. So, yeah, they found their quarterback. And Sean's going to keep saying, well, we're not sure yet. We're going to keep going. And they're going to have their ups and downs. But this kid's mature. He understands the system. And Sean's a really good coach. I think part 2 of this story is all this stuff about we got to hire a young coach to come in and I think Sean proves that when you can hire an experienced guy that knows how to build an organization, how to develop a culture, that you're well ahead of the game than you are trying to subcontract all those things out.
Yeah, I do think it's a really good case study for what people should be looking at in the offseason, especially when it comes to the draft, because we sat here on draft night in this very studio in Las Vegas, and I think both of us were like, okay, hey, maybe we might not have been the biggest fans of Bo Nix, but we can at least trust the coach that he's going to, which is the biggest part of the equation is, hey, you're not just drafting players and acquiring talent, as we've discussed this entire offseason. You also need to have a plan when you draft that player, because the plan is more important than when you pick them or what the measurables were coming out of whatever college they went to. You have to have some sort of development plan to develop those skills within the system. And it's early. We're not crowning Bo Nix. Who knows? Maybe he's a disaster in September. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's still early. It's the preseason. But just based on what we've seen and also what we've heard as well coming out of Broncos training camp is that this is a really good marriage, Sean Payton and Bo Nix. And Payton has kind of bet his job on Bo Nix. And so far, he's looking like at least he knows what he's doing with this thing.
Well, he knows what he's doing. I mean, the difference between what the games are being taught on television and the game that the fans see and the game that goes on. I was having this conversation this morning on a Zoom call. I asked somebody today, how does Pro Football Focus grade players? And they said they have 1,500 people, and maybe 2 guys do the skill in a game and 2 guys do the trenches. And most of them are all interns. Okay, and they're grading these players, but they have no idea. And if you and I went into we're working in an office, and I was watching the tape, and I went over to the position coach about the tape and asked him a question, he may say, well, we made this check, but the guy didn't get it. Like there's 15 layers to every single play.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, there's a guy in Pro Football Focus. He's just grading the play based on what he thinks. And now he's the authority. He's an intern. He's never done anything. He's just some guy grading. And that grade becomes the authoritative report. And then when he watches Bo Nix in college, that becomes the authoritative report. When you have a professional, somebody who's done it for a living, who understands what he needs, Bill Walsh, I can look at Jeff Garcia and say, he's perfect for what I want to do. Meanwhile, he's playing in Canada, right? Yeah. He can look at Rich Gannon and say, he's exactly what I would want. Send Mike Holmgren to go work him out. I think to me, there lies the problem. And we have too many people that have opinions that have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to the quarterbacking position. We really don't. We really don't. We think they think they know because they grade completions. They think they know because, like I was watching, the Jordan Love again the other day. And Jordan Love, for all the things he does really well, he doesn't do some things very well. Like in that San Francisco game, he's got an H angle route coming in, and he throws it. The guy's wide open. He throws it 3 inches behind him. The ball gets tipped, intercepted. San Francisco takes it away. Like there's accuracy, and then there's accuracy to where the receiver needs to have the football. When you look at Josh Dobbs last night in the 49er game, he threw the ball really well. And when you look at Bo Nix, the accuracy isn't about did he throw the ball to the receiver. It's where he put the ball on the receiver. Sometimes you want the receiver to turn to his right after he catches it. Sometimes you want him to turn to his left. And so that takes really a very good, accurate quarterback. And I think when you watch Jordan Love, when he throws the ball outside the numbers, I think he's really good. I really do. I think he's going to get better. Now he's got to get better with his accuracy. There's no question about that. In terms of when you're under pressure, same thing with Daniel Jones. I mean, Daniel Jones you can be accurate all the hell you want in 7-on-7, but when the pressure and the guys are in front of you, man, that's a harder game.
Yeah. And you end up throwing a pick six, maybe. We'll get to what we saw from Daniel Jones in his return from the torn ACL for the New York.
It wasn't his fault. Come on, it wasn't his fault.
He's trying to throw the football away. It was draped on him. The Las Vegas Raiders, they made their choice after I thought what was a very kind of meh sort of performance by both quarterbacks against the Dallas Cowboys 2s and 3s Saturday night, but they're going to go ahead and go with Gardner Minshew as their week 1 starting quarterback. It felt like that's where we were headed with this thing, and we talked about what could the tiebreaker potentially be for the Raiders? And you said it's going to be the things like leadership and guys kind of rallying around a certain quarterback, and they've done that with Gardner Minshew. As Aiden O'Connell will have to wait his turn. I'm sure we're going to see O'Connell at some point, given Minshew's track record, but it's going to be Minshew to start things off week 1 when they visit the Los Angeles Chargers.
And that's not going to be good all year. I mean, Minshew can come in and play well for 2-3 games, and but if he gets pressure inside, I mean, the Raiders can they protect him inside? That's going to be the issue. Because if you get in front of Minshew, it's over. Mm-hmm. Look, this isn't the reason there was no decisive winner is because they don't have a quarterback, right? Yeah. They can't separate themselves. There's no quarterback who can come in and take over the team. This is a team without a quarterback. I mean, look, I'll say this again. When they made the decision to move on from Derek Carr, everybody was in support of it, including the owner. Yep. But they never filled in the question of if we get rid of Carr, who do we go with? Look, Carr's not perfect. We know that, and Carr has all his deficiencies. But until you can address that, Carr helps people keep their jobs because you're just good enough not to get fired. Whereas now you're in a situation where you don't have a quarterback, and that's when you start to get fired. Mm-hmm. And so, look, whether they play O'Connell is a backup quarterback in the league, and that's not a knock on Aiden O'Connell, but that's what he is. He's just not he doesn't have enough. He's not a varsity athlete as Tony Soprano would be. He just doesn't have that ability.
He doesn't have the makings.
I hate to sound like Uncle Junior here, but that's what he is. And so it's the same thing. So the Raiders are a team without a quarterback. Pittsburgh's a team without a quarterback. Now, look, we can all sit here and talk about Russell Wilson being a disaster, which he was, right? But, I mean, Jones, the right tackle, was as much a disaster as anything. They didn't protect it all. There's more issues there than just we need a quarterback in Pittsburgh. Like, he didn't have time to throw the ball, and Justin Fields isn't – I mean, when you can't see somebody separate themselves in the competition, you don't have one. I mean, and so if you're Omar Khan, you're sitting there, when do I call Ryan Tannehill? When do I call Ryan Tannehill? If you're the Raiders, you should be calling Ryan Tannehill because he's better than both these guys.
Yep.
At least Ryan Tannehill could make you a better team. At some point now, Ryan Tannehill's going to get the bat phone's going to ring, and Alfred the butler's going to have to answer it because somebody's got to make that call. Neither team, Pittsburgh or the Raiders, are going to win. And as good, and look, I don't want to bet against Mike Tomlin ever, but they're not going to win with their present situation. Tannehill, if healthy, especially in Arthur Smith's
exactly.
offense,
Yep.
Especially there. He's had success. Like, I would not wait. You have nothing attached to Russell Wilson. You could cut him tomorrow. You've got nothing. There's minimum salary. It's not guaranteed. He then goes back on Denver's payroll. You have nothing to it. If you think that. Or, bring Tannehill in, or if you want to play Fields and Tannehill, but they don't have a quarterback. I mean, look, it's pretty clear. And neither do the Raiders. Devontae Adams hasn't even really participated in camp. They have, and then the offensive line, when I watched that tape when they were playing, Dallas was playing all their backups, and the Raiders were struggling to run the ball against them. And Dallas can't play run defense.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't look good for that Raiders offense. It was. In fact, it was really bad for the Raiders, and on both sides of the ball, it looked a little bit suspect. The Cowboys had a lot of success running the football on them, but that's the name that I kept bringing up all throughout this offseason is Ryan Tannehill's just on the street for somebody to go ahead and get him. And I get it. Yeah, it's hard to get excited about signing Ryan Tannehill, but if you're the Raiders or if you're the Steelers, he's much better than what you have, and especially in the Steelers' case where he has experience in the system. It's not going to take him long to come back in here and fire it up and get going. So I think if you're Pittsburgh, that's a path that you go down if you want to at least have a competent quarterback. If you're the Raiders, that's a path that I would have tried to go down in March, but apparently they wanted to do the Minshew thing as he's going to end up being their starting quarterback. But what's interesting to me, to kind of tie a bow on this segment here before we head to break, is that the Raiders win total over at our show sponsor DraftKings, that's 6.5. The Broncos is still sitting at 5.5. That to me seems wrong. Like, that's completely wrong. Like the Broncos are a better football team than the Las Vegas Raiders. I just have more faith in the Denver Broncos in winning this season than I do the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll talk more about what we saw over the weekend throughout the rest of the podcast here, but let's take a quick break. This is the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
We're rolling along here on the GM Shuffle, and this is an interesting time now that we're through 2 weeks of the preseason. I think teams starting to look towards week one in particular and getting ready for those types of games, Michael. But kind of just lay out what all 32 teams across the National Football League are doing as we begin this week with the final preseason games later on.
Well, I think there's lines of demarcation in the offseason that you as a general manager and you as a head coach, when you put your head together, you kind of have, you build a team in the offseason. You started in January, you put together your team need list, you go through all the players you think you can count on, you build your team needs, you start satisfying the team needs. And now this week, before the last preseason game, you now sit in a room with your head coach and say, how do we have to play to win? How are we going to have to win games? Because now everything's been declared. The guy that we were counting on to be a legitimate starter at right tackle may not be good enough. So we're going to have to chip over here a lot. The guy that we thought could be a really good cover guy is not going to be good enough. So maybe we can't play as much man as we want. Maybe we'll have to get more zone. Now is the time that most coaches have to readjust. And this is in any sport, right? This is in any sport. You have to kind of sit there and say, how do we have to play to win? Now, the Chiefs, if they're right and Rice doesn't get suspended and Worthy's really good, Andy can extend what he wants to do and how he played last year at the end of the year, and he can extend it further and build to it because maybe he now has receivers that can be explosive. So he can change what he was doing last year. But it took Andy till Christmas to answer this riddle. He won a lot of games before that because good teams can win without answering these questions. Bad teams, they can't. Bad teams can't. And if you wait too long into the season before you realize, look, here's where we are. Here's how we have to play. If we don't play this way, if we don't play with a lead, if we're the Dallas Cowboys and we've won 12 games, great. But when we don't play from in front at halftime, we're not winning. We're not good enough. We can't play good enough run defense. So Mike McCarthy sits in his office and says, okay, how do I have to play this year? Am I better on run defense? He's watched Mike Zimmer. See, I watched the Raider game the other day. I can't really tell because they didn't play all their guys. So you don't really know, are they improved on run defense? Mike knows because he's watched it at practice. So I think, to me, this is the time of the year where you have to be very strategic. Let's take the New York Football Giants. We watched Daniel Jones play, and we watched him against the first pass play of the game. He throws an interception to Stingley, hits him between the 2 and the 4, and he drops it. Right? It didn't get off to a great start. It didn't look like they could really run block very well in the game. So if I'm Brian Daboll and I'm sitting here and I'm watching the Giants, okay, and I want to be explosive, and I got neighbors and I got all that, I got to try to do is I got to sit there and say, okay, we got to win first down. We got to win first down, because if we get this game into a third down game with Daniel Jones, it's going to be ugly. So I got to win. I got to figure out how I'm going to win first down. I got to figure out how I'm going to win second down. And then with my defense, I have to play from in front, because we're not going to be able to play the kind of defense we want to play that matches what our personnel is. So that's the decisions that have to be made today, this week. And then you start practicing towards it. Then you walk into your offensive coordinator and say, hey, here's where we have to spend more time on this, and that, and less time on that. Right?
Yeah.
Because the coaches, they don't really see the big picture. This is where Parcells was brilliant. Or we're going to eliminate that shit. We're going to work on this shit. Okay? And so you have to kind of have somebody in the building, that's hopefully would be the head coach, to say, this is the kind of team we need to be. This is who we are, and now we're going to get an identity. And we're going to get better at what we're doing. Because now all the things that we thought we could do, maybe we can't do them anymore.
Yeah, and I think this kind of coincides as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, with like the waiver wire, and people start picking up, claiming some of these guys that get cut from other teams, saying, hey, because we have to play this way, we need this kind of personnel because this is our path to victory.
Right. Like if I'm the New York Football Giants, right, I'm going to find me a tight end that can block and control the end of the line, because I got to be able to find a way, and I want a bigger back than Singletary. I got to find a way to help Daniel. Oh, I'm describing Saquon Barkley, but I want a bigger back.
If only
I can't be a spread team. I mean, I know I got neighbors out there. I can't be a spread team, right? I can't be a spread team. I'm still not any better in the offensive line with Runyon and Van Noot over at Van Roden at right tackle and right guard. I'm really not any better than I was. Evan Neal hasn't even. We don't know, so I'm not counting on that anyway. So the point here is like, I'm going to have to run the ball. I'm going to have things where Daniel Jones is running, because if this becomes a 35-40 drop back pass game, I'm losing.
Yep.
I'm losing. And so we got to slow the game down, right? And so now maybe like you said, on the waiver wire, but we need to get a tight end that can block, a good one. We got to fill that hole. We don't want to do that. That's not who we really want to be. But that's how we have to win. See, nobody, the whole Giant offseason, they never asked the question, how do we beat the Cowboys? They never asked the question, how do we beat the Eagles? And I'm sure they're probably not asking the question inside their building, how do we have to play to win? That's the question that has to be asked the last 2 weeks of August in 32 buildings. How do we have to play to win? San Francisco doesn't really have to answer that question, because they know how they have to play. Kyle, once he gets Trent Williams back in, he gets Ayuk back in, boom, he gets everything back in. Kansas City doesn't have to. Philly, that's going to be an interesting question for Philly. What are they going to do? Are they going to sit there and say, okay, we're going to let Hurts throw it 60 times? Or do we go back to what we do? How do we have to play to win? And how that's complementary football. I think that's the hard thing. And when you're watching these like the Bears, I watched the Bears the other day. Did you watch your Bears?
I watched the Bears. Caleb Williams rolling to his left. Nice throw to Roma Dunes. I saw it.
Okay, great. See, here's the other problem about preseason football: highlights. Okay, you just quoted a highlight. Okay.
Yep.
But let me give you facts. All right. Let me give you facts. The first 3 drives of the game, Caleb Williams went 3 and out. They couldn't do shit. And guess what? The Bengals were playing their backup off defensive players. Okay. They were playing all their backup defensive players. The Bears couldn't get a fucking first down. But you see highlights. Oh, Caleb Williams can do this. Mahomes behind the back. Highlights are the killer of preseason. They're the killer of preseason, because you get lured into thinking you saw something. They went 3 plays. They come out. They try to throw the ball. They're in Chicago. It's windy. It's going to rain. It's going to be cold. They got no power in their offensive line. Like if you're Matt Eberflus, he's smart. He knows when we got to when we got to win the game with 8 minutes to go in the game, how the hell are we going to be able to run the ball with power? How are we going to be able to do it? See, nobody talks about that. How do the Bears have to play to win? Well, the Bears want to play because Poles has built a Madden team. He wants to throw it. So even against the shitty backup of the Bengals, I'm just saying the second team.
Yes,
if I'm Ryan Poles, I'm sitting in my office and saying, wait a minute, we couldn't move the ball. Well, it's young, it's early, we're growing, we're getting there. No, the Chiefs would have gone right down the field and scored against any backup. So to me, that's why it's so important. Like Caleb Williams, okay, great. He's 6 for 13. He gets a pass interference call for a field goal, and then then it becomes a game where it really was, all right, it made 1 or 2 plays, but they couldn't make the play. He was very inaccurate with the football. Now, I think he's going to be a good player, but I think they really haven't answered how they have to play to win.
Yeah, I mean, we were clamoring for them to say, hey, like, shore up the offensive line. Let's make this a little bit more physical. They went the skill position route there, drafting Roma Dunze, who I think will be a good player, like we've said. These are not evaluations about the players.
This is not a talent conversation.
Exactly,
it's the same thing about Montez Sweat. That was not about he could have easily signed Montez Sweat in free agency for not losing a second round pick. But that's a whole other conversation, right? If you're going to pay him what you paid him, you would have gotten him. That's pretty clear. The reality of it is somebody in the building, whether it's Eberflus, whether it's Kevin Warren, somebody's got to ask the question, how do we have to play to win? John Mara needs to be walking around the building saying, how do we have to play to win? Mm-hmm. And you just can't, we got to play our game. No, what is our game?
Yeah, what is it? Yeah.
What is our game? Is our game, we got to be really, like if you're Miami, right? If you're Miami, you know that if it becomes a third down game in Miami and you can't RPO people and you get Tua can't read his first route and throw it, you're not as good on third down as you are on first and second. Mm-hmm. So we got to stay out of, we got to play from in front. Steven, the owner just came out and said
Ross,
that, Stephen Ross, he just came out and said he expects a Super Bowl. Okay, good luck.
Good luck, Mike McDaniel. That's high expectations. We have a couple of minutes left here in this segment. Can we talk about the Atlanta Falcons real quick? Because I was very perturbed by this. I was ready to go, locked and loaded, sitting on my couch back in the Pacific Northwest, ready to see Michael Penix Jr. play. And he did not play. Head coach Raheem.
He's not going to play next week.
He's not going to play.
See, here's where you can't question the knowledge. You can't question the knowledge, the insight.
They've seen enough.
The ability that goes on in Kaiser Sose McKay's camp and with Super Bowl winning general manager Terry. These guys know way more than you know, I know, than anybody know. This is at a level like you think you're at Harvard. These guys are at Oxford Deluxe. I mean, they're so far ahead of you, and you have no chance to catch up to them.
He's a Rhodes Scholar.
As Uncle Junior would say, you're so far out of the race, you actually think you're leading.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes perfect sense for me. It makes perfect sense to draft Penix 9, to not play him in 2 games and then decide he's the backup quarterback. It makes perfect sense. Why would we do that? Why would we put him out there? Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, and now we're going to sign Justin Simmons and give him $8 million. We've already got Jesse Bates in there. Okay, we trade a 3rd-round pick for Judon. We don't get an extension yet on the deal. We only have about $6 million worth of cap room. Like, what are we doing? Now all of a sudden we need defensive players? I mean, you talk about a guy that has no idea, although he's won multi-Super Bowls, about how to build a team. Are you kidding me? I mean, Penix not playing is got to be one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my life.
I couldn't believe it.
I know he's had a lot of reps in college, but does this tell you that Taylor Heineke's the backup quarterback?
I don't know what they're. I couldn't believe the decision.
It has to, because why would you not? If Penix is the backup, you want to get him ready. You got to put him against Pittsburgh and all that cross dog shit. If Kirk gets hurt and he's not seen any of this stuff, you want to do that?
It's incredible. Raheem Morris said that what went into the decision to not play Michael Penix, he said that Penix showed the coaching staff enough in that first preseason game in Miami that they didn't feel the need to play him in the game on Saturday. Quote, we feel really good with where we're at with Michael. Mike showed us last week enough that we don't have to play him in the preseason. I mean, the guy's he's a rookie. And I guess he showed us enough. One game is all he needs. Meanwhile, they said we don't want to see him for 2 to 3 more years, is what they said. Their own words.
I mean, like, what do they put him on a shelf? I mean, he's like Ferris Bueller's friend's car. He's just going to sit in there and not drive it.
Michael Penix Jr., a fine wine in Atlanta, apparently. All right, we'll be back to talk some more on the other side.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, we have the preseason rolling along here. This is the GM Shuffle, Femi Abebefe, Michael Lombardi. And I'm curious, Michael, to get your thoughts on this, because last year we sat here and we had grave concerns about the Carolina Panthers. Those concerns turned out to be very, very true once we got to the regular season, as they had the worst record in the National Football League. Is there a team that you have watched so far in this preseason to where you have changed your opinion, whether good or bad? It could be maybe you thought a team was not going to be that good, and all of a sudden now you're impressed. Well, you see, obviously taking everything with a grain of salt since it's only the preseason. Or maybe there's a team that you thought was going to be really good, and all of a sudden there's some red flags that have come to the surface. Like, is there a team that you felt that way in watching the preseason for these first couple of weeks?
I haven't seen a team that you thought, oh boy, they're in trouble. I mean, look, I think the Giants didn't look good the other day. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be clear. When you watch the game and you see it, and I'm not picking on the Giants, but I mean, we watched the Texans go, pretty much drive right down the field. Their first team offense against them, and then they took another score and went right down the field. So, but those are all correctable things. I think you're not doing a lot. They didn't look poor. Like I thought the Panthers looked poorly coached last year. Mm-hmm. I would not say that about the Giants. So no, I haven't really seen that. And watching the tape of the games, I thought Green Bay last night looked really bad. But Green Bay wasn't playing their guys. Yeah. And so, you get beat 28-2 or 29-2, and you're playing Clifford and you're not playing any of those guys. I think Green Bay, what I would be concerned about is these teams. One of the things that happens is when you don't play your starters, you play your backups. Great. All right. So what happens is when you need backup tackle linemen and you're watching the Packers, are we sure they have any backups? On the other side, I'm watching Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm thinking Cincy's going to be a good team because their twos are stopping the Bears ones, and their twos are moving the ball on the Bears ones. Now they got snagged. They got a negative play here. I mean, they couldn't put 8 consecutive plays together, but I thought Cincy's depth, I think Burton's going to be a really good player for him. And when they get Chase in the slot, it's going to be dynamic. I thought Cincy's offensive line looked like they came off the ball. Pittsburgh's offensive line looks like they're a mess, but I know Pittsburgh gets better as the year goes on. Mm-hmm. I think Cleveland's tackle situation is got to be a concern, especially, you're playing against Dallas opening weekend. Now, not that DeMarcus Lawrence has been great, but, you still have Mr. Garrett. You still have to block him.
Yeah, like Michael Parsons is going up against a second or third string offensive tackle. That's advantage Cowboys in that situation. I think maybe it's more of a situation about how bad the Raiders might be, but the Cowboys, I thought their 2s and 3s, they were moving like Trey Lance. Trey Lance was moving the ball down the leading touchdown drives and stuff.
I mean, everybody complains about Trey Lance didn't get any reps. I think Mike giving him all the reps is great. Yeah, naturally, everybody complains about Trey Lance not getting any reps, but it's okay to not give any reps to Michael Penix. And nobody says a word about it. Like, nobody in Atlanta, like, what are we doing? We draft this guy the 9th pick overall, 9th pick in the draft, and we're sitting him on the bench next to Raheem. We've seen enough? You've seen enough? Like, really, what have you seen?
Nothing.
Go back and watch that Miami game and tell me you've seen enough. It was the first preseason game. Don't you want to watch him play against better players?
Apparently they don't.
See, that's the whole – why doesn't somebody ask, hey, Raheem, yeah, I know it was the first preseason game, but their level of competition was atrocious. There was nobody in the game.
Yeah. It's my only theory is that maybe they don't want to start a quarterback controversy, and maybe Penix looks that good, and they don't want to start a quarterback controversy to where the first Cousins interception.
They have one already, Femi. They have one already. There's no way this works out. I know that Arthur Blank thinks that they're ahead of everybody how they think, and certainly, but they already have one. Yeah. I mean, because Penix is going to be the most popular guy on the team. Let me ask you something. This is going to be amazing. Just hypothetically, let's say this, which it makes no sense at all, but of course it fits the Falcons.
Yep.
Let's say that Kirk gets hurt in the first game. Mm-hmm. Is Heineke the backup? Does he go in, or do they put Penix in cold? I assume they're going to put Penix in cold.
I think it's
Do
Penix.
they cut Heineke? Do they trade Heineke? Is he available out there?
Maybe that's what they wanted to show. Maybe this is an audition for Taylor Heineke, who, oh, by the way, all we've done is seen him play the last few years. I don't think we need to audition that tape. But apparently that's what this was. And maybe it was, hey, let's showcase Taylor Heineke in this offense. And then maybe somebody goes and takes a nibble and gives us a day 3 draft pick or something like that so they don't have to fight somebody on the waivers. Maybe that's what it is. But I just think that there's no logical explanation to defend what the Atlanta Falcons did, sitting Michael Penix on Saturday and then already announcing that he's not going to play this week. Like, this just seems idiotic.
They doubled down on not having logical. I mean, they doubled down drafting them. There was no logic.
Yeah.
This whole building of their team. The Cousins decision was great. Got a quarterback. Your team's a little older. Perfect. He fits. You get 3 years. You got Heineke as his backup. Let's draft a really good front seven player. Mm-hmm. Boom. We get him in here. Let's get some more defensive linemen. Let's get this front seven. Because let me tell you something. They're going to have a hard time blocking Tampa. They had a hard time blocking Tampa last year. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a hard time blocking New Orleans. Right? They're going to have a hard – I mean, as good as everybody thinks their offensive line is, they're going to have a hard time blocking those teams. And those teams aren't going to have a hard time blocking them, even with Matthew Judon. Because if they don't redo Matthew Judon's contract, he'll be like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, if things don't get off to a good start too, it's like he's like, what the hell? Like, all right, whatever. Let me protect myself for another contract coming up a little bit later on. I do want to talk about the Houston Texans though, because we saw them play the New York Giants. The Giants, of course, had their struggles, but Houston, I've been really impressed with how just their overall approach this preseason. They're saying, hey, like, we're going to be buttoned up. We're going to go out there. Our guys are going to play. Stroud, he was out there once again, 7 of 10, 88 yards. I know it's a mixture of ones and twos that the Giants are playing, so you don't want to read into it too much there, but he hit Stephon Diggs on a couple balls. Like, they've had chemistry with Tank Dell as he comes back from the injury and everything. Like, Houston, that's a team that, like, I think you can identify saying they're going to be ready to roll in September because they have no stone unturned for the Texans, and they're taking every opportunity to try to get this team better as they look to build upon the division title that they had last year.
Let me ask you a question. If Andy Reid plays Patrick Mahomes in preseason games, why? And you were a young coach, wouldn't you want to play your guys?
Yep.
Like, if I follow Andy Reid, right?
Seems like a good
Houston
person to follow.
Comes out, Houston takes the first drive of the game, go 11 plays, 59 yards, and they get stopped on downs, right? Mm-hmm. Then of course they pick off our guy and get a touchdown.
Yep.
Right. And then they come back and they get the ball again after an interception. And they get it. The Houston won. They go punt. Then they come back and they get it again. I think now they got the backup quarterback in and they go 12 plays, 74 yards right down the field. So like I think they're building their team the right way. I think they're playing their guys. Here's the other thing. You can't evaluate your team if you don't play your guys.
Yep.
You can't evaluate them honestly. You just lie to yourself. And the third preseason game, you just want to play all the guys who are going to be backups, are going to be on practice squad, because everybody else is playing them. And you don't want to play your ones against their threes. What's that do? Does that reinforce you? I mean, if you're Ryan Poles, you're sitting in your office today saying our ones couldn't move the ball against the Cincinnati twos. We got to figure this out.
Yeah. No, I think it's like we said what Mike Tomlin said. We're looking to minimize speculation in the training camp and the preseason. We want to minimize like we need to figure this out now so then we can figure out what kind of team that we need to be in order to win football games. Like when you start doing this, we're resting our guys, all of a sudden things are a mystery come the regular season, and that's when losses in September count just the same as losses in December and January. And that's what people have to realize. Like that's when you talk about these tiebreakers and they missed the playoffs by one game or they did this or they could have won the division. Oftentimes you can point back to a game early in the season and say, if we had just won that game, maybe our fortunes would have been a little bit different in the postseason. Speaking of bad fortune, this is unfortunate based on what we saw last year as well, but Buffalo Bills linebacker Matt Milano, it's like, I don't know, maybe he just can't stay healthy at this point in his career.
He can't stay healthy.
It's unfortunate because Matt Milano left with a torn bicep. He's out indefinitely for the Buffalo Bills. He's going to undergo some surgery. Yeah,
they're gonna carry him all year, and he can't stay healthy. I mean, look, I'll tell you one thing about Buffalo against Pittsburgh the other night. I think McDermott told his team, if you guys come out and play your asses off, this is it. You don't have to play week 3. We'll get into a weekly routine. Because they played their asses off. They blitzed. They did a lot of different things in the game. It was almost like a full squad. It was the full view that they wanted to show Pittsburgh that, hey, here we come. And they played at a level that Pittsburgh never even got close to being at. Mm-hmm. And Fields and Wilson took the pain of it all. because neither of them are very good. But the rest of the team offensively did. Now, Pittsburgh's defense did. But I think, to me, of course, you put Trubisky out there. I mean, like, it's amazing. He's still a backup quarterback in the league. Like, you cannot win a game with Trubisky. I'm sorry. You can't. He throws an interception, and I watched it this morning. I'm like, who are we throwing it to here, Mitchell? Like, seriously. Yeah. Like, you've been in the league how long? You're making this throw? Like, it's just unbelievable. But
it's who he is. It's who he is.
It's who he is.
Yeah, I was surprised that he was back in Buffalo, but I guess they like him as Josh Allen's backup. Yeah, Buffalo pretty much played everybody but Josh Allen, so you got to see some of their offensive starters and the defensive starters as well. Josh Allen played in the previous week of the preseason when they played the Chicago Bears. But let's get to, before we wrap things up, blue chip, red chip. We continue this series. We have the tight ends this episode. Speaking of Buffalo, their second-year tight end, Dalton Kincaid, is on this list here after a pretty good rookie season. We'll see if he can continue to take that step forward in year two. And then David Njoku of the Cleveland Browns, Trey McBride, who was sort of the breakout star last year for a bad Cardinals team. I think a lot of people, especially fantasy football players, expecting a lot from Trey McBride in 2024. Then Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots and Pat Freiermuth with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those are your red chip tight ends.
Yeah, I think Kincaid's more of an F than he is a true Y. But I think if you're in fantasy, he's going to catch a zillion balls this year. He's really a good player. And, I mean, the other guys speak for themselves. I think McBride and Hunter both play on shitty teams with shitty quarterbacks. At least McBride did for the early part of the season, too. Although Kyler Murray hasn't played at all, so we don't know what the hell he looks like. He hasn't played well in 2 years, but that's a whole other conversation. But I think, those guys are playing with quarterbacks that can't get them the ball. They're really good players, though.
Yeah, no, those are good players. I think players that these offenses are expecting to take those steps forward and be an integral part of what they do from a passing game standpoint, and also in the run game as well, and helping out with the blocking. The blue chips, these are the cream of the crop, 5 best tight ends that we have in the National Football League. Headlined, of course, by Travis Kelce, the ageless wonder. Now we have to call him Travis Kelce with the Kansas City Chiefs. Sam Laporta in year 2, which Laporta, he might be the best by the end of the season. He looks outstanding with what he can do for the Detroit Lions. George Kittle with the 49ers. TJ Hawkinson with the Vikings. He's coming back off of the ACL injury. That's just another weapon that Sam Darnold, Kevin O'Connell can have in that Minnesota passing attack. And then Mark Andrews also coming back from injury, although we saw him in that AFC title game for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, I think Laporta is going to be really special. Kittle's good. Kittle's can do everything. Hawkinson, we wait and see about the knee, but he was very good for them when he played. So, these guys can do a little bit of both, and I think that's the most critical part. If you can only do one, it's hard.
How about Iowa football? Laporta, Kittle, Hawkinson. I mean, Noah Fant's out there.
I mean, look, because Kurt understands what it needs for the position. He needs somebody who can block a 9 technique. He needs somebody who can handle a 7 in pass protection. He needs somebody who can run routes and get open. I mean, scouting inside out. It's not that complicated. If you know what you're looking for, you can find it. But if you don't know what you're looking for, and not everybody's in tune to what you're looking for, you'll never find it. This guy will come in. It's like, we talked about this on the Daily Coach today, on the video for the Daily Coach. It's like, if 3 people in charge of feeding a dog, the dog starves. Well, that's what happens in scouting. If 3 people are in charge of looking for a player, they're never going to find a player. Whereas if 3 people are looking for one specific traits within the position, you'll find players. But if you don't spend time educating the scouts on what you're looking for at each position, they have to have this, this, and this. But the scout will come back, well, he doesn't have this, but he's a really good player. No, we need this, this, and this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it becomes very complicated.
100%. And if you're looking for a tight end, just tell the scout, hang out in Iowa City.
Iowa City, just go there. You'll find plenty of them.
You'll find some. There could be future All-Pros. Just hang out in Iowa City. At worst case, they'll just be good players like Noah Fant is. But Laporta, Kittle, Hawkinson, 3 of the 5 best tight ends that we have in the National Football League. It used to be Notre Dame that had the crown with like Kyle Rudolph and other guys. But it's Iowa.
Cole Kmet's a good player. He didn't make the list. He's close to making the list. But I mean, he's been playing without a quarterback for so damn long.
100%. Did you
He'll
see
be a better player this year.
They have Gerald Everett on that Chicago Bears offense too, which to Bears fans, I'd say,
it's
look
a
out.
Madden team.
Look
it's
out.
an all-Madden team.
Look out, man. Gerald Everett is famously a double agent, as I've coined him sometimes. If the ball might hit him in the hands, he might just toss it to a safety. You never know with Gerald Everett out there on a football field. But that does it for this edition of the GM Shuffle. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. The YouTube audience, keep commenting, keep liking on our YouTube page. We really do appreciate all of the support. Michael, I'll talk to you on Thursday as we'll get more into these week 3 preseason games and also start to look ahead to the regular season that's coming up just right around the corner.
And hopefully Brandon Ayuk, Trent Williams, CD Lamb, all these guys will be in camp. Yes.
I thought we were gonna make it the whole pod without talking about them.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. All right, Femi, thanks.
I'll see you Thursday.